Strictly Comics is now accepting books for pressing and cleaning services. For deals and promotions, go to Facebook at Strictly Comics. Click the Services tab for pricing and get a free quote. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready. Don't freeze.
What's up, everybody? It's Edwin back again for Strictly Comics, and I'm right here with...
GH Mickey.
GH Mickey. All right. We're just going to do a follow-up review to the Black Panther. First, I want to thank everybody who actually watched our first video. We got, what, like 13,000 views in the first week?
Yeah. Which
was pretty cool, which only gave us more reason to do a follow-up review. We actually just came back from seeing the Black Panther for a second time, and it was just as good, if not better, than the first time. But that being said, we felt like we wanted to give you guys a little bit of background because we got a lot of comments, people not really knowing much about us. Which I understand because the title was An African's Perspective, and although I'm not African, my wife is. Do you want to tell us where you're from?
Yeah. Okay, my name is, I was born Michelle Nakoshi Aya. I was born in Ghana. I was raised in Ghana most of my life, and then I moved here for school. And later on, I met my husband and got married.
Yeah, and I've been told through the comment section that I'm white, I'm Mexican, I'm half black. It's none of those. My father's from Puerto Rico, but my mother's Caucasian, and I did not grow up with my father in my life, and I don't speak Spanish. So now that you guys got a little bit of background of who we are, let's go ahead and get into the review. I'm going to say a couple things real quick, and then I'm pretty much going to turn over to my wife, and I'm just going to ride along. Number one, we waited until we got in the box office sales from the first week of the Black Panther. Guys, this movie, when I told my wife, she was pretty surprised as well. This movie, from first week to second week, has only dropped about 46.5%. Yeah. That is good.
That's huge.
That is really good, and here's why. Bad films typically drop 55 to 60% from the first weekend to the second weekend. Good films are actually in the range that the Black Panther is. So another thing that I took notice of was domestically, Black Panther made over $400 million.
Domestically.
Domestically.
American movies don't do that well domestically.
They usually don't. Yeah.
Yeah, they most of the time.
But and
at least not recently. Sorry.
And a lot. No, you're fine. But a lot of the films don't usually show their budget either because they don't know how people are going to react to the film.
Right.
And we still haven't got the budget for the Black Panther, but I'm going to guess it's probably in the $165 to $180 million range. But that's going to be very interesting to find out once they disclose that and compare that to how much the film makes. Now, I just want to say something real quick. Something that's really, really important about this film is that as far as the Marvel films that are out, it falls like 5th or 6th. You have like the first Avengers, which domestically was made like 687 million, something like that. I think Iron Man 3 and Captain America, I don't know if it was Civil War or the Winter Soldier. All time Captain America or all time Iron Man 3 did like 409 or 408,
I'm not sure.
And Captain America did like 408. So guys, there's still a lot of time left for Black Panther to get more domestic sales, and probably I can predict that they would probably surpass Captain America and Iron Man and probably be number 3, at least as far as Marvel films are concerned, as far as the top domestically grossing films. So I found that to be interesting.
No, I find that fascinating too, that the black movie with a black cast, black director is surpassing all these mainstream movies, whereas the trend has been that Hollywood has always assumed that because, you know, black people are a minority, they don't have that much spending power. So that should be a note to you, black people.
Yeah.
A lot of this.
And for the second week, the film was actually the theater was pretty packed.
Oh my goodness! And this week it was so difficult. We were like, okay, we'll get to the movies. We'll go to one of the early showings, like a 5 o'clock or 5:30 movie showing, and it's gonna be pretty simple, pretty. Because
that's Sunday. We thought we were just gonna just roll in and just pick our own seats.
Of all the falsities.
Yeah. That wouldn't happen.
That was the line just for the box office was super long. And then when we finally got there were 2 separate seats like miles apart, and we're like, that's not happening. We checked other theaters and tried to see, you know, what was happening with them. They had sold out in some of the shows, and then we finally went to another theater, which was like, of course, much bigger capacity, and then we snagged one, but it was for an hour later. So Black Panther is really, really picking up steam to be a #1 movie. I don't think it's over. I really don't. Especially this is the week where I think last week was
oh, it's gonna make over $1 billion.
Last week was the week where people were still skeptical. I mean, like, you should see Twitter, you should see social media. Everybody's just going Wakanda forever, you know, Black Panther, and you know, always talk about Chadwick Boseman or Michael B. Jordan, and you saw, you know, the hype on social media, and so that hype has carried on to this week, and that's where people who are like, you know, the second, you know, I feel like it's the second wave of people who are like, okay, I've heard enough. You guys are flooding my timeline. Let me go see what the movie's about. And it finally picked up, and they're going to see, and it was packed, I tell you guys. Everybody was coming to see Black Panther. Everybody. Everyone. And
actually, before we go further, if you haven't seen this film, this is going to be a spoiler-filled
I'm sorry,
review.
Guys.
It's just been too much time out there.
Pick up on our first ones, though. Our previous review. Come follow up with this one. Subscribe, please. Come follow up on this one and see if you agree with us. Most of the messages were, of course, the backdrop was Wakanda. It had a lot of beautiful, authentic African, pre-colonial African architecture. But we believed that, we came up with a theory that we believed that pre-colonial African history, Africa could have been, without the interruption of the slave trade, was an interruption of the further advancement of Africa as a continent on itself, because people were trading amongst each other, people were learning from each other. I mean, if you think about the Songhai Empire, Mali Empire, those things were happening even during that time, and they were rebuilding and they were learning. So I believe that Wakanda is kind of a vision of what the continent would have been like if there was no interruption in the growth of the continent. So keep that in your mind, and I think that's also what excites people. It's not necessarily a fantasy world, but what could have actually been. Okay, so let's talk about our hero and our villain. Our hero and our villain are two sides of the same coin. If T'Challa had a little bit of Killmonger in him, I believe T'Challa would have been a great king. If Killmonger had a little bit of T'Challa in him, he would have been a king of justice.
It's like what you said. You said that, and I felt this the same way as you did after I saw it for the second time. You actually do kind of feel sympathy towards Killmonger a little bit.
Yeah.
And you feel like it because you understand that he is a product of a broken home, fatherless home. So that being said, to have that hatred stored up in him his entire lifetime, it consumed him. It overcame him, and it was his soul and pure motivation. He identified with it almost.
Yeah, and I thought that for T'Challa, he was rooted in love. Killmonger was not rooted. He had his roots snatched up from him. So his father was killed by T'Challa's father, and that grew a monster in him. And I feel as though between the African and the diaspora, which is Africans all over the world, and anybody who has African roots, that is something that we're still battling, and that's the separation between both. For the Africans, I think that we are grounded in our roots, and for the people in the diaspora, they have had their roots snatched up from them, and so there's a level of anger that comes from that.
Let's talk about that, because somebody said in the comment section that this is kind of the elephant in the room. Through that, we understand that a lot of African Americans are out of touch with their roots, like you had said.
Right.
And a lot of people are commenting, saying that it's a film about Africans against African Americans and African Americans.
Well, I felt like And you know, from an African perspective, I used to think it was just anger and hatred, and I just think that it's a reaction. If you think about when T'Challa said, "You are just full of anger and hatred," and he was like, "No, I learned from the people who took away from me, and I'm 2 steps ahead of them." So basically, what he's saying is, yes, I was stripped of everything that I knew, but I became better at their own game than they were.
But he was blind also, because T'Challa was right. He did become like them.
He did become like them. Yeah, but and here's the key to all of it in my mind, is that the key to it is that your true identity is your victory. That's what I got from the movie. So T'Challa, in his true identity, stood his ground and stood being who he was, and that gave him victory in the end. Yes, you can be like someone, and you can learn to be better at being that somebody than that person already is, but in that, you're not gonna necessarily win. You're just gonna win out of scorn and anger, and it's gonna throw you into a destructive pattern. I believe that T'Challa, in offering a hand to Killmonger, should, it sounds crazy, but if the movie ended with Killmonger being healed and coming around and showing T'Challa all the things that were happening in the world outside of him, then T'Challa's eyes would have been open and seen that, okay, your anger is completely justified. Let's utilize it effectively to change the world. And I feel like Killmonger was a character who was solely filled with anger, and he was raging out of control like a raging fire, and even fire can be useful. Fire out of its bounds is destructive.
It could have happened, but like we talked about earlier, Killmonger is coming from more of a militant background, a militant perspective of conquering and dominating physically. When T'Challa was more like, I guess you could say it was almost like conquer or win through love. Yeah. Not necessarily killing unless you absolutely had to. Yeah. You know, there is, at least in people who have watched this film, that there's just this disagreement and discomfort, I guess, a little bit with the film. I understand that a lot of African Americans identify mostly with Killmonger, and a lot of Africans would probably identify mostly with T'Challa.
Yeah, and you know what? Watching the movie for the second time, I completely got it with T'Challa. But at the same time, I finally, my eyes were open. Nothing has really opened my eyes. I don't know how to, a better word to put it, but don't use this, don't use it against me. But a better word, like my African privilege. Like, I did not know. No, seriously. No, seriously. Okay, hold on. Let me explain what I mean.
Please do.
What I never understood, and every time I saw, you know, I met an African American who was very pro-black or whatever, I was just like, what is wrong with you? Why are you so angry? The world is full of roses. I mean, what? You didn't have a driver? Why did you not have a driver? You didn't have, like, you know, but you, like, imagine of people who have been systematically stripped to the point of disadvantage. Let me start that again. No, I use, as an African, please stop.
No, go.
Cut it out, please. Please cut that whole. That's really, really bad, because a lot of Africans come after me. But anyway, no, as an African, I did not understand the perspective. Whenever I met an African American, I did not understand their perspective, because I thought they were so militant. Coming up from a somewhat middle class background, I did not understand that there were people who were continuously stripped of the identity. And for me, I was always supported. I was always told where my roots were, who I was, where my people were. I could tell you where my dad's village is from. I could tell you my mom's village. I could tell you my grandma. I could tell you all the way back to my great-great-great-great-grandfather. Being that leads to my next point, T'Challa came from a place of love and support. Killmonger lost his roots and came from a harsh place, which bred him into anger. Killmonger was so blinded with anger, and justifiably so, ruled out of anger, and the truth is, anger scorches and destroys everything in its path.
Got any closing thoughts or shout out?
Never freeze. Don't freeze.
She's been said. That's like the 20th time she said
Don't
this.
freeze. Nobody freezes. No. You have to roll. You have to roll your arms like that when you talk to the people because it's a South African accent.